Okay, great. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are joining us from across the continent. You are welcome. Habari, Selam, Sani Bonani, Mbote, Kodi, Ahlan. Greetings to you. I am Leon Senyange. I will be moderating this session, this webinar, indeed, that has brought us together specifically to discuss a very exciting item, that is sport. Sports as a pathway to employability, or sport as a pathway to youth employability in Africa. That is the discussion we have today, and indeed it's a wonderful one that touches each and every one of us in the different elements of sport that we are involved in. Of course, it is about providing Africa's youth with actionable insights on career and professional opportunities the sports industry presents on and off the field of play. Indeed, it is bound to be a wonderful discussion this afternoon. The webinar is brought to you by the African Union Sports Council, Young African Leaders in Sports, International Platform on Sport and Development. I have a wonderful panel, indeed. It's one that we shall be listening to, quite young therein, but also been through several areas of sport. The panelists, Ms. Charity Mwathi from the Commonwealth Secretariat. Charity Mwathi is a stakeholder engagement specialist with a strong track record of delivering high-impact initiatives across international and government organizations. She currently works within the Social Policy Development, Youth and Gender Directorate at the Commonwealth Secretariat, where she provides technical support to the design and implementation of programs spanning youth, health, education, gender, and sport for development and peace. In her role, Charity leads the development and execution of innovative outreach and stakeholder engagement strategies, strengthening collaboration across the Commonwealth's 56 member governments and key partners. Panelist number one there in Charity Mwathi, you are welcome. Panelist number two, Mr. Jabu Mutuwa from Ithuba Lethu Sports Hub. Jabu Mutuwa works at the intersection of sport, media, and entertainment in Africa with a focus on youth empowerment, employability, of course, the discussion we're going to have here today, and the growth of the sports economy. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts in International Relations and a Bachelor of Laws. Jabu currently serves as an International Olympic Committee young leader for the year 2023 to 2026, under which he founded Ithuba Lethu Sports Hub, a youth-led organization which uses sport as a vehicle to connect young Africans to skills development, career paths, and employment opportunities. Definitely fantastic pick for the discussion we have here today. Our third panelist, Ms. Shimaa Daly. Ms. Shimaa Daly is an international sports lawyer and co-founder and managing partner of Sports and Justice Law Firm, where she leads the sports commercial and entertainment law practice. She advises athletes and sports stakeholders on contracts and disputes, with experience before FIFA and the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and involvement in intellectual property-related matters. She also founded the Conscious Female Players Initiative, supporting legal awareness and protection for female athletes. Definitely a panel therein that will give us a very good discussion on what sports and youth employability is all about on the continent of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'd like to welcome you to this conversation. It's bound to be an exciting one. Sport as a pathway to youth employability in Africa. Now, leading us into the opening remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome Mr. Timothy Kajja, the president of the Young African Leaders in Sport, that is YALS, a Pan-African forum advocating for the inclusion of young people in African sport leadership and governance. Mr. Timothy Kajja, please, for your welcome remarks.
Thank you, Leon. Can you please confirm that you can see and hear me?
Yes, sure, we do see and hear you.
Thanks a lot. Yes, I'll start with the opening remarks and salutations to the head of the African Union Sports Council, Dr. Chipande, the Executive Director of the International Platform for Sport and Development, and our keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Ben Sanders, our dear panelists that have been well introduced by our moderator, distinguished guests, young leaders, fellow youth across the continent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from where you are joining us from today. On behalf of the young African leaders in sport YALS, I extend a warm welcome to this timely webinar on sport as a pathway to youth employability in Africa. Thank you for carving out 90% of your time to invest in this continent's greatest asset. That's its young people. Africa stands currently at a demographic crossroads. Studies indicate that by 2025, 2 out of every 3 job seekers will be African youths. That's dependent on how our population is growing on a daily. Yet, in stark contrast of that, the International Labour Organization, ILO, also tells us that we are off track in terms of creating job opportunities. And that includes putting young people in either in employment, education, or training. The SDG target globally is 8.6. But Sub-Saharan Africa alone is putting that as 2.9. That's over 10 percentage points off the track. There isn't any other region globally that is doing as worse. And the demographics even get more sharper if you lessen them down or if you narrow them down to youth and women, especially being the girl child. So that's not a mere statistic. It's a call to action for us. As we ponder on that, sport offers one of the most powerful, practical, and scalable vehicles or avenues through which we can bring Africa back on track. Beyond the physical well-being, social cohesion, and the vibe that it gives us, the sports economy generates real employment entrepreneurship opportunities from coaching, from athletes, from entrepreneurship, events management, sports tourism, stadium construction, tourism, digital innovation in sport. All these are opportunities that can enable Mother Africa get back on track in creating employment and training opportunities for her youth that are growing at a rate faster than any other continent on the planet. Yet too many of us remain unaware of these pathways, and this largely should be to the lack of the networks, the skills, the exposure that can enable us seize the opportunities that the world of sport presents, enabling us to be skilled persons who are productive to develop Mother Africa. This is precisely why we are gathered here today. This joint webinar seeks to reposition sport not only as a tool for participation, but a strategic pathway to decent work, skills and development, and economic empowerment for Mother Africa and her youth. Over the next 80-70 minutes, you're going to hear expert insights on the valuable skilling and employment opportunities from industrial leaders and practitioners who have walked this talk on the African continent. Our dear participants, this space is yours. The ideas, the experiences, the aspirations are most valuable to us. I invite us to engage, learn from one another, and most importantly, leave this session equipped with clear, actionable pathways and a renewed conviction that sport can indeed be a game changer for youth employability in Africa. I thank you all and I yield the floor back to our dear moderator, Mr. Leon Senyange.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Timothy Kajja. There indeed is a beautiful statement with regard to how we shall be and what we shall be discussing for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure having you. Quite a very good number we have discussing the topic of sport and youth employability. And of course, on the continent of Africa is the Africa Union. The Africa Union Sports Council is a specialized technical office of the African Union responsible for sports. Here with us, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming Dr. Chipande, the head of the African Union Sports Council, for his opening remarks. Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senyange, and good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. And on behalf of Her Excellency Ambassador Ama-E Twama-Moa, our African Union Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development, it is my honor to really welcome you to this webinar on sport as a pathway to youth employability in Africa, organized in collaboration with the Young African Leaders in Sport, YALS, and the International Platform on Sport and Development, popularly known as Sport and Dev. So this is the second time we are collaborating to host this webinar, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation to YAL and Sport and Dev for this valuable partnership and for their continued commitment to advancing this important agenda. The African Union's Agenda 2063, a 50-year strategic framework aimed at transforming Africa into a prosperous, integrated, peaceful, and people-centered continent driven by its own citizens, recognizes sport as a catalyst for development by maximizing its social and economic value. This vision is further reflected in the African Union Sports Council Strategic Plan 2024 to 2028 that was endorsed by the African Union Executive Council that met in February 2026. So this plan places strong emphasis on sport for development, good governance, sustainability, and economic growth through enhanced sport infrastructure and talent development. So the African Union Sports Council is advancing these priorities through partnerships and emphasizing the importance of partnerships. And in this case, the partnership with YAL and Sport and Dev and other initiatives. We are also collaborating with Sports Biz Africa and the Ministry of Sport of the Republic of Rwanda to host the 2026 Sport Biz Africa policymakers and stakeholders roundtable in September this year in Kigali. So this Pan-African platform brings together government ministers, private sector leaders, multilateral institutions, and civil society to discuss practical and sustainable sport policy solutions. And the roundtable is themed Sport as a Catalyst for Africa's Development, aligning policy, vision, investment, and action. And we look forward to seeing most of you who are on this platform in Kigali in September for this roundtable and forum. This clearly underscores the importance of today's webinar to the African Union's agenda. It complements ongoing efforts to translate Africa's deep passion for sport into actionable policies and sustainable investment strategies that promote youth empowerment and expand the African sport economy. So collectively, these initiatives contribute to the realization of the African Union's enduring Pan-African vision of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Would like to most sincerely thank you for joining us in this webinar, and we're looking forward really to a stimulating and productive discussion. Thank you. Back to you, moderator.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Chipande. Africa's deep passion for sport is definitely no doubt about that. We love our sport, regardless of the traditional ones that we've played. Recently had a brief competition locally here called Daly, small marbles off the trees, the traditional sport therein, to football. More recently, the Africa Cup of Nations therein, getting the continent talking. But that indeed is the nature of sport. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I'd like to welcome you. The numbers are growing, and that is very exciting on my part and everybody's part that is indeed being a party to this conversation. Sport as a pathway to youth employment in Africa. The conversation definitely continues, and this is where I would like to bring in what key elements we shall be talking about this afternoon and later on in the next minutes. From the International Platform on Sport and Development, a leading global platform sharing knowledge, building good practice, facilitating coordination, and fostering partnerships in sport and development. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Ben Sanders, the Executive Director of the International Platform on Sport and Development, for the keynote address we have here today. Indeed, the bigger question is, what does the data tell us? Doctor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinyange, and a warm greetings to everyone joining us across countries, cultures, and even continents today. It's an honor to be here and working in partnership with the African Union Sports Council, Dr. Chipande and his team, and of course, young African leaders in sport, Mr. Kajja. And yeah, really warm greetings to everyone joining us across the continent and beyond. Africa is a large and diverse continent, but as we know, under-recognized and undervalued often in global affairs. But when we talk about sport and we talk about sport for development, many of the leading programs and policies have been developed and sustained in Africa. And it's time for us to reset some of these narratives that come out of the world, and that we need to think about what comes out of Africa, for Africa, by Africa, and with Africa. And that's why we're delighted to be here today with the African webinar on sport and youth employability. I will share some findings and some data from Sport and Dev. And we really encourage you to join the dialogue, introduce yourself in the chat, and we will hopefully have some time for Q&A after our esteemed panelists take the floor. So I will share my screen and share the presentation with you all, which I hope maybe you can confirm, Mr. Sinyange, that is showing now on the screen.
Yes, it's surely showing on my screen. I hope it is showing on everybody else's screen because there's quite a lot for us to learn over the next few minutes. Indeed, it is showing, Doctor.
Great, thank you. So we're talking about sport, we're talking about youth employability in Africa. And I'll provide a bit of an introduction to this, a little bit about the field, and then really, you know, the challenge and the opportunity with this demographic dividend that Mr. Kajja alluded to. And then some of the work we've been doing at the platform and some of the ways that young people can engage with us and with tools, resources, and courses for young people as we move forward. I think, firstly, before I even begin, is, you know, youth are often branded as the future, but I really think we need to acknowledge youth are not just the future. Youth are the present. Youth are with us all the time, and we need to acknowledge that youth are not only the future. They're not relegated to a time that is still to come. They are here now in the present, and we need to recognize that. This is especially important in sport for development, the field which has grown rapidly in the last 20 years, a huge diversity of actors and approaches. It's been recognized by the AU, the UN, the Commonwealth, and many other public and private actors. And there have been many projects that have been delivered across the continent, and we need to recognize the need for context-appropriate, locally driven, human rights-based approaches. Now, this paragraph is often quoted from the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, paragraph 37, which recognizes the contribution that sport can make to the agenda, and especially the contribution it can make here to the empowerment of young people. And I think this is a landmark moment. We played a role at Sport and Dev in getting this into the 2030 Agenda, as did many others. But what is important to realize here is that sport is recognized, but there are no clear goals, targets, or indicators related to sport. So in the next set of global goals, I think we need to be more ambitious and have binding commitments linked to sport and recreation. Agenda 2060 2063, the Africa We Want, and the SDGs, they provide a common framework for policies, programs, and projects. But as I said, it's important to contextualize them. And despite many leading programs and projects occurring across Africa, there is a need for greater influence and decision-making in global policy processes, which often still tend to be north-driven, when actually a lot of expertise and experience does reside in the global south, including across Africa. Sport and sport for development can be youth-friendly. It speaks to young people in a language they understand, and young people often implement programs as coaches. This is an example from Waves for Change in South Africa, and they participate in sport for development programs. So they're important beneficiaries, but also can be leaders and change agents, in addition to being implementers and beneficiaries. I think it's really important that we recognize sport as a human right, often referred to as a forgotten right by the United Nations, but it is a human right, and too many people across the world, across Africa, including young people, are not able to access this right. And we see levels of sporting activity and physical activity declining in recent times since COVID, for example. Secondly, we have the largest youth generation ever. There are more young people in the world than there have ever been, around 1.2 billion people aged between 15 to 24. And by 2050, 1 in 3 young people will be African. Over 10 million young Africans are entering the labor market, but only 3 million formal jobs are created annually. We have very high levels of youth unemployment in many countries, including where I am in South Africa, where we have 50% youth unemployment. And this really is a ticking time bomb. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity we need to harness so that young people can be better involved in our society. I think we all know the playing field is not level. We know that a high proportion of youth are not in employment, education, or training, NEET. And we know that young women are significantly affected more than young men, and that, of course, people of lower socioeconomic status are also significantly more affected. In some countries, like South Africa, I said, youth unemployment is very high. And even those that are in employment, 72% of young workers across the continent are in insecure jobs. SDG 8 is not just work, it's decent work and economic growth. And we need to work hard to reverse this, to create a level playing field where there are greater and equal opportunities for young people. So what role can sport play? Well, we know that sport can help young people enter employment, education, and or training. And actually, there's evidence showing that sport can be more effective at this than other sectors. In addition, sport can support young people in a variety of other ways. It can improve their health, support their education, can challenge gender inequities. It can allow youth to desist from crime or violence and engage in pro-social behavior. Sport does not automatically result in positive returns, but it can provide positive and multiple returns on investment. And the returns are most pronounced among the regions and the populations that need it the most, like girls and young women, like refugees, like people of low socioeconomic status, and those that are often excluded from the playing field or relegated to the sidelines. Target 8.6 in the Sustainable Development Goals, reduce youth unemployment under SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, is really, really important. And we face a challenge in this regard across Africa, as I noted, and we are not on track to meeting this target. There is evidence in Europe, for example, that the percentage of young people aged 15 to 29 that are accessing employment through sport are doing this at double the rate than in total employment. So the blue triangle here shows the total employment. So across the EU, we see that there's about 18% of young people employed. But in sport, this is double. About 36% of young people aged 15 to 29 that work in sport are employed. So we see sport in Europe is twice as effective at engaging young people in employment than the overall economy. Now, one of the problems is we need this research for Africa, and we do not have the same research at scale across the continent. So in this slide here, drawn from the Commonwealth's work on sport and the SDGs, model indicators, an amazing project which is collecting evidence and data at scale, we see that when we talk about economic growth and productive employment across the globe, we only have the data for Europe, for the whole continent. Hence, what about Africa? What about Asia? What about the other countries? I am sure that we will find similar evidence as in Europe that a large proportion of young people can be employed and engaged through sport, but we need data and we need evidence from Africa generated in Africa. And there are many attempts underway at the moment to reach this data, but it is critical for us to move forward. There's also evidence here on, for example, the percentage of workforce in Namibia within the sport, fitness, and recreation activity sector. So, how does Sport and Dev fit in and how can we help? Well, we're a leading hub for the community. We've existed since 2003, and we provide open access, free resources in 4 United Nations languages that you can use, that young people can use, that officials, policymakers, practitioners can use to strengthen and sustain their work. We're best known for our website, which is available in 4 UN languages: English, with a range of tools and resources, French, Spanish, and Arabic, free of access. We run a range of activities trying to engage young people as leaders, and have run a range of amplification exercises, including calls for articles, submissions, webinars, and reports. But of course, there's so much more we need to do with young people. And we invite all young people, as well as all the stakeholders here today, to use the platform, to register on the platform, to submit your news, information, research, tools, and learnings from Africa and across the world to strengthen the sector. Everything we do is free and open access and will remain that way. We also run a massive open online course on sport for development in partnership with the Commonwealth and the Australian government. We've had over 11,000 learners join this course, including many from across Africa. And we were really proud to host a hybrid MOOC with the African Union Sports Council and the Commonwealth, with senior government officials from across the continent. The first hybrid MOOC was done in Africa and was a huge success with Dr. Chipande and his colleagues. We also have this course freely available in French and Arabic for counterparts in those parts of Africa, and in Spanish for other parts of the world. So, to conclude, how can you and how can youth get involved? Well, you can register on the website, you can submit content, you can put yourself on the map as an individual or organization, you can join the course, you can help us reshape a more equitable sport for development movement. Because Sport and Dev exists for the community, by the community, and with the community. So we invite you to get engaged, to profile your work, and let us make waves together so that Africa and sport for development in Africa can prosper. To conclude, we know sport for development has grown rapidly in the 21st century. We know that the SDGs and Agenda 2063 provide a common framework for action. But we also know there are more young people than ever, a huge proportion in Africa, and they face challenges in accessing employment, education, and training. Sport can play a role in tackling this problem, reducing the number of youth not in employment, education, or training, and have many other benefits for young people. But we need more data and we need more investment, especially from Africa and beyond. Young people are vital to sport for development, not just as beneficiaries and coaches, but as leaders and change agents. And as was the call at the start of democracy in South Africa, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and the country moved out of the shackles of apartheid, Sekunjalo Kenako, the time is now. Thank you.
Sekunjalo Kenako, the time is now. Indeed, the time is now for us to dive deeper into the conversation of sport and youth employability. Thank you very much, Dr. Ben Sanders. They're incomprehensive. Of course, the statistics don't really dip further into what Africa has to present. You make the call. We need data for Africa. The data is lacking. The comparisons with Europe are quite glaring therein, and I think that is where we shall be diving into some of these conversations. A lot more about Sport and Dev. The website has been posted, yes, on in the chat box. You can go there, find the appropriate website for the language as well that you can follow, sportanddev.org. You can register, and like Doctor has made mention of, you can post something therein. Who knows? That's something to do for you. Start a possible start for employability. Therein, what kind of skill do you have? Do you have a writing skill as a sports person? Sport and Dev is giving you the opportunity to have your articles on the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, I again would like to welcome you to this conversation on sports and sport and youth employability. We shall be diving into that conversation. But before we get into that, I would like to invite Miss Charity Mwathi from the Commonwealth Secretariat. Of course, Africa has 21 countries in the Commonwealth. Reasonable number out of 50 something, just close to half therein. We make a greater percentage therein. And the composition of sport, is it quite different at the Commonwealth as it is, or pretty much the same as it could be at the African Union? What does the story tell? You have a presentation on that, kindly, Miss Charity.
Thank you so much, Leon, and for setting the scene. I think it's been great listening to Dr. Chipande talk about the goals they have at the African Union, Dr. Ben Sanders talk about some of the work that we're doing in collaboration, and also for Timothy, who talked about the demographic dividend. So I am Charity Mwathi. I work in the Social Policy Division at the Commonwealth Secretariat. For those who do not know, the Commonwealth Secretariat is an intergovernmental organization consisting of 56 member states, 21 of which Leon has said are African. So Kenya, Uganda, Lesotho to mention, but a few are African states. And in this directorate that I work in, we promote sports for development and peace. I hope you can all hear me well. Yes? Great. So I wanted to share some of the work that we do here at the Secretariat, and especially when it comes to sports for development and peace. We advocate for the use of sport as a vehicle for development and peace building, helping countries maximize the benefits of sports. So whether this is improving health, education, creating employment, stimulating economic development, and realizing human rights and gender equality. Our work focuses on how sports can be used to contribute to national development objectives and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we're also a global leader when it comes to measuring the impact of sport, playing a key role in coordinating with international organizations such as Sport for Dev here with Dr. Ben Sanders, governments, and the sports movement. So this is a brief explanation of some of the work that we do. Obviously, sports benefits and advances strengthen some of the SDG goals when we talk about governance, equality and inclusion, the environment, the economic development and employment, which is what we're going to be talking about. I also wanted to highlight this impact report, the Global Sport and Sustainable Development Goals Baseline, an initial impact report that was launched this year. So I'll link all these resources in our chat later so you can have a chance to go through them and see some of the data and evidence that we have collected, because having reliable data is essential for transforming how governments and organizations make decisions regarding investments, planning, implementation, and evaluation of sports programs. We also have the Commonwealth Ministers meeting, which I thought it would be good to highlight, where we have the ministers of all these 56 member states meet every 2 years before the Commonwealth Games, which will be happening this year, by the way, in Scotland, and the Summer Olympic Games. So each meeting focuses on priorities, sport policy issues, and progress made on collaboration and joint work. For the young people here, thank you all for joining. So the Commonwealth also has 14 youth-led Commonwealth youth networks, and one of the networks actually focuses purely on sport. It's the Commonwealth Sport Developer and Peace Working Group. So as I said, it focuses mainly on sport. It's been established since 2013, and if you'd like to join, I'll share all these links in the chat so you can also learn how you can be part of it. The main strategic themes for this are advocating, educating, and demonstrating how sport can be used as a tool for development. I am so glad Dr. Ben mentioned some of the work that we've done. Obviously, the massive open online course, the MOOC on sustainable development, Sport for Sustainable Development, Designing Effective Policies and Programs, was one of the great collaboration and projects that we've had. And, you know, as he mentioned, 11,000 people from over 200 countries have benefited from the course, and it's now available in all the languages that have been mentioned here: French, English, Spanish, and Arabic. So when we talk about youth for... Sorry, can you all see my screen? Fully?
Yes.
Yes?
That
Okay,
is good
great.
enough.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so when you talk about sports as a tool to contribute to decent work and economic growth in Africa, we look at the scale of the sports industry. Obviously, it's massive, right? When we're talking about the sports games that we have, how that leads to job creation from coaches, I think Timothy had mentioned this earlier, the infrastructure, the events, from ticketing to legacy projects, the tourism, the hospitality industry that also benefits from this, the construction, manufacturing, so merchandise, tech for sports. When we look at the small businesses that are growing, the entrepreneurial training that comes from it, but also the skills training that comes from sports, you know, when you learn soft skills such as teamwork, leadership, discipline, and also the volunteering opportunities that come, so one can learn how to exert themselves, push themselves, and also grow as a person. The inclusion of marginalized groups, so women and girls, refugees, and internally displaced persons, as well as grassroots disability sport and physical activity. So there's so many support services, so many sectors that benefit from the sport in general, such as marketing, you know, you have sports journalism, you have sports medicine, the media, also just supporting the economic growth of all these countries. I thought it would be good to show this illustration of how much money, you know, is made from some of these events. I know the one event here that is in Africa, or rather was in Africa, is the Durban Commonwealth Games. I'm producing 502 million pounds. So you can see how much that generates, you know, the economic growth for all the countries. I also thought it would be good to mention AFCON. How many of you, by a show of hands, or maybe write in the chat, how many of you watched the AFCON games?
We certainly watched the Africa Cup of Nations, the final at that.
Yeah, I want to see people reacting in the chat, but I mean, this reached 6.1 billion impressions, which was actually the widest and the largest engagement from the AFCON Games. So this just shows the potential that Africa has to grow, especially when it comes to the sports sector. Also wanted to highlight for the Kenyans in the house how when it comes to marathon running, for example, and other sports, you know, we have the rugby there, the netball. Africa usually leads when it comes to this, and it's great and would be great to have investment in the sports sector, especially to highlight some of this. So in summary, that's just a snapshot of some of the work that we do, and I'll share more links in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Charity Mwathi there, and for a brief rundown on what the Commonwealth actually does. Yes, the games are coming in Glasgow. I hope Kenya will be top of the medal standings on and off the track. You know, the short distances are quite a problem, but the long ones, yes. Congratulations to Sawe there for the sub-2 record at the marathon, and indeed, you'll be carrying the flag high. Uganda is closely chasing. South Africa in the sprints they're in, but we'll see how things go in Glasgow. Nonetheless, this is where I would like to bring in my panelists yet again, Charity Mwathi, Jabu, Mutuwa, and Shimaa Daly for the conversation on sports, or rather sport and youth employability in Africa. We've had it all. We've heard from Dr. Sanders. We've heard from Dr. Chipande. The demographic dividend therein from Mr. Timothy Kajja. And again, the highlights from Miss Charity therein. And Jabu, this is where I would really want to throw the first question to you. We've had the numbers, around 1.2 billion people aged 15 to 24, 16% of the globe, the largest generation ever. By 2050, 1 in 3 young people globally will be African. The demand for the jobs therein will majorly come from Africa. The numbers definitely don't lie. Is there a problem with how we're trying to fix our young people with the opportunities that sport could avail?
Absolutely, Leon. I think youth unemployment in Africa is one of the defining economic and social challenges of our time. And in South Africa, where I sit, it is especially visible because, as Dr. Ben Sanders mentioned, South Africa's official youth unemployment rate for ages 15 to 34 has remained extremely high for the past couple of years. I think at the moment it's between 50 and 60%. And there's millions of young people who are excluded from work opportunities. But what I often say is that the issue is not a shortage of talent, but rather it is a shortage of pathways, because in Southern Africa, we have boundless, talented, creative, and most importantly, resilient young people. But many of us do not have the access to the networks, the practical experiences, nor the visibility into this growing industry. But what I firmly believe in, and we built a case around this at Ithuba Sports Hub, is that sport can definitely help to close that gap because, number one, it is already trusted. Secondly, it's loved all across the continent. And thirdly, it's culturally relevant, right? Not to speak of the economic impact, which is pretty obvious. So I think an issue that we can maybe try to overcome before coming to a point where we truly see sport as a tool for youth unemployment and or youth employment rather, and a vehicle for job creation, is that we must stop viewing sports, and this is specifically a call to young people. We must stop viewing sports and only think of sports in terms of athletes, because it's actually, as we have proven in this opening part of the webinar, is that it's actually an economy. It creates jobs in media, events, digital content, administration, coaching, physiotherapy, logistics, sponsorship. I mean, you can keep going when listing the amount of facets that the sports industry has, which are, again, different pockets of job creation that we can definitely activate as a global community. And, you know, the reason, or rather the significance of sports versatility in being able to take in a number of different young people who come from many different experiences. You don't necessarily need to have a past experience in the sports industry to be involved in sports. You don't necessarily need to have a sports management degree or a sports adjacent degree in order to work in the sports industry. It's such a versatile industry. And that is why through Ithuba Sports Hub, we've tried to create programs that are focused on, number one, exposure, but most importantly, access. So, for example, we ran a volunteer program in collaboration with the Football Foundation for Africa last year in Mombasa, Kenya, that gave 10 young people the opportunity to have an experiential learning opportunity to see how an event works or how an event is rolled out within the sports industry. We also have mentoring and career readiness works that helps youth understand what careers exist beyond playing professionally within the court or within the field. And, finally, our launch workshops, which we ran across South Africa, with our partner school, Nova Pioneer, engaged over 60 young people through sessions on careers in sports and how we can apply personal branding lessons from the sports industry into our own lives. So from a Southern African perspective, Leon, as I close off, I think the opportunity is definitely real, but in order to unlock it, we need to build systems that connect youth potential to real, meaningful, and lasting opportunities.
Sure, thank you very much, Jabu. There indeed, very wonderful talking points therein. And I would like to again throw this to Ms. Shimaa. We've had the Southern African perspective. We probably would want to know what it is like in North Africa, Egypt specifically. The football teams are there. The volleyball teams are actually strong. Participation in different spaces is quite visible for the North African teams. But is there just as much a shortage of pathways for people in the sports or the sports industry as compared to what Jabu here says could be in the southern part of the continent?
Wow. Thank you. Before I answer you, I want to thank everyone for the valuable presentations about numbers, about the statistics. Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for Leo for your kind introduction. And also thank you, the organizers, for the invitation. I'm really happy to be part of this discussion, especially on such important topic around youth. So in the situation in North Africa or in Egypt, yeah, we have better infrastructure, but the practical reality in Egypt show that while sports activities are increasing, they're not sufficiently tied to clear career pathways. Many young people engage in sports as a hobby, but the lack of clear contracts or protected legal pathways from legal perspective, I think so, makes these opportunities unsustainable. Because the biggest challenge is building legal framework that ensures sports and also awareness about the sports as an industry or as a work for young people. That make people they don't have knowledge about the sports as a field, you know. So this is my opinion about this matter.
Great, thank you very much. Of course, awareness, you speak about that, and the desire, sport as a hobby for North Africans, but well, quite exciting when you look at the stadia they're in, quite full every other time. I follow the volleyball they're in just as much, a great following, but it could be a hobby, as you say. For Charity East Africa, is sport a hobby? Are we looking at finding the jobs they're in within the sports sector? Are our athletes, probably during or after their participation in sport, getting involved in something that they can do that can give them a resource beyond what they were probably doing as active sports personalities?
Yeah, thanks for this. I would like to say that East Africa definitely has great athletes, especially when it comes to marathon running, not just Kenya, but Ethiopia as well. When it comes to also other sports, I know that we've actually come far when it comes to different sports here in East Africa. And I think for me, what I would like to see more is creating systems for mentorship, because an athlete definitely grows and reaches a certain age range where perhaps they cannot be viable to, take part in these sports as they did when they were younger. And it would be good to see the older generation of athletes give insights and, coach the younger generation of athletes to make sure that that ecosystem is flowing and ensuring that we're building that generally. As per now, I know that the AFCON is going to be hosted in Kenya this coming year. So we're building a stadium. I know that we're investing heavily on that. And as I showed in my PowerPoint presentation, the many trickling effects that do come from sports as an industry, and especially when you host a game, I think is definitely worth investing in. And yeah, I would like to just see more of that system generation, especially mentorship and coaching.
Mentorship and coaching, it is the systems of mentorship, of course, probably speaks to soft skilling therein, where I'm an athlete, probably I have something, I could go and learn administration here and there. I could probably learn logistics. It takes, going back to study. You made mention of the courses that are available. Dr. Sanders as well highlighted that there are some tutorials that are available for anybody, not just the sports personalities. But Jabu again spoke about the fact that we should not just look at the athletes themselves, but then even those who are involved around the athletes, which speaks to the issue of soft skilling. Are the skills being made available? Are those small elements being made available to our young people, the athletes, those around them, so that they are able to be equipped with the competences that make them employable in those particular spaces? Maybe, Jabu, you want to tell me what the story looks like?
Yeah, sure. I think, there's many ways in which, folks coming from professional careers within sport, or those who are part of their entourage, part of their team who supports them. I think there's many ways in which they could upskill themselves to be able to justify being able to provide value in a position within the sports industry. Because I believe that, competitive sports, which is the arena that, professional athletes would be coming from, are one of the best training grounds for the modern workplace, right? Because I believe sports teaches multiple valuable skills, and I would take the entire webinar listing all of them. But just to name a few, I believe sport teaches performing under pressure, managing emotions, especially after setbacks, working together towards targets, consistency and discipline, which I believe is one of the most important skill sets that sports teaches us, responding to feedback, which is, I think, one that is underplayed in many times, and also competing without losing composure, right? Which are common themes that we see within the workplace. So these are, I believe, valuable workplace traits. And maybe to speak a bit about the work that we do at Ithuba Lethu Sports Hub, is that in this sort of aspect, we work with young people who may not yet have the corporate experience, but many already understand pressure because they've already experienced it through sport, right? Selection pressure, match pressure, performance pressure, you understand? So this isn't the only aspect, I believe, that should be demanding our focus, because competition alone is not enough, right? Modern workplaces also need collaboration. They need emotional intelligence, communication, inclusion, problem solving. And so that is why it's as important that we place significance to people coming out of the sports industry and very quickly upskilling themselves before going back into the industry to ask for a job or to offer themselves as a person who can add value to an organization. And I believe academic training is important in this aspect, but also mentoring, right? And I'd love to briefly speak about the mentoring work that we're doing at Ithuba Lethu Sports Hub, because we believe it is super important that young people don't only receive the academic or the technical training for them to be able to come into the sports industry, but we see it important that that is paired with a strong foundation of mentoring, because mentorship helps young people to translate their competitive instincts into professional maturity, right? It teaches that success is not only about beating others, but it's also about adding value, building teams, sustaining relationships within the workplace and outside. So yes, definitely. I think there are definitely many ways in which we could utilize sports to prepare youth and the people around them for pressure, but also for opportunities in the workplace. Before I close off, Leon, I believe not only does sport contribute to preparing one for the workplace, but I think it definitely does that for entrepreneurship, maybe even more than the workplace, right? Because I think there's so many skills that sports teaches that are directly applicable to entrepreneurship, right? And just to speak on a case study that I found fascinating, that speaks to how sports can truly have an impact in empowering a young people or a young person rather to go into entrepreneurship or empower a young person to go into sports. There's a story that came out of the work that CESLA does. CESLA is Sports Education and Sustainable Livelihoods in Africa. It's a partnership between Laureate Sport for Good, the IOC, and the International French Development Agency. And what CESLA essentially does is uses sports as a tool to improve youth employability and livelihoods through providing grant funding, training, peer learning opportunities to a whole host of different organizations. And one of the organizations that CESLA funds, which is called Friends for Health, which is an initiative in Rwanda, had a young person who was 23 years old come into their program, right? And he took part in a football-based entrepreneurship session, received mentorship, the business skills that were being provided during that session, and community support throughout the whole process. And now this young person runs his own convenience shop in Rwanda. So I think this really speaks to how training and sports-based education can truly allow young people and the people around them to empower themselves to go on and have a valuable impact, not only in the workplace, but entrepreneurship as well.
Great. And we'll definitely get into the conversation of entrepreneurship because it's very, very critical. While I may be a sports personality or running the track and playing football here and there, my skills in doing business may not be all that. And yet, if you're not really in an office, you probably should be able to do business to generate you some revenue. So we'll get to that conversation later. But for Miss Shimaa, I am an athlete. I have attained the skills that Mr. Jabu is giving me. I have gotten a job. The job I now have is strict. I can't play sport on a Saturday because I have to be, in the studio. I have to be, doing some particular work. Are the legal frameworks favoring, not really in isolation, but could the legal frameworks in one way or another be advocated for to support participation of sports personalities or athletes to do both work and sport at
that? In practice, I see that the young people who are involved in sport tend to be more confident and taking responsibility and handling pressure, because sports put them in real situations where they have to perform, make decisions, deal with both success and failure. I feel that the sport made them have like a strong personality, and they can work in themselves. They can handle the failure. Yeah, I think so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Of course, Shimaa there speaks about the nature of sport and the winner-loser kind of attitude, the skills it really imparts in an individual. A bad day on the field carries a probably bad attitude to work thereafter. Personally, I did rally cars, did navigating for a couple of years, and the day we didn't win a rally or rolled out of a rally would mean I have to go back to work. Would I carry the same attitude? Probably not, but I think sports therein helps us. And to Ms. Charity, we're diving into the issue of the regulations that support the sports personalities and their capacity to get, wherever they are in employment. From what you've been able to experience, is there opportunity for sports personalities to easily walk out of work and go and do sports? And for mentally those that take part for the national teams, not just the clubs alone, but for the national teams, because the Glasgow Games are coming or the Commonwealth Games are coming and you're going to be away for 3 weeks. Do you ask for leave for 3 weeks to take on that assignment? Thereafter, if you're a rugby player, you're doing the HSB sevens, you're going to be away on that circuit for another 5 or so weeks. You're barely at work. Do the legal frameworks facilitate that?
Yeah, thanks. I think essentially we have to look at sport as the actual work, right? Because if you're training to go and participate or compete, you're definitely putting in time, commitment, discipline that requires you to wake up early, prepare for you to be able to play these games. So if we look at that as the primary work, then that means that we need to focus more on how we can help these athletes be able to do that for the entire period, whether it's annually, to prepare towards that. Because I think that other sports personnel, for example, from other regions in the world are able to do that. They're able to sustain themselves off of that sport. And I think that's maybe the conversation we need to be having, which is, if I am playing rugby, how can I ensure that the rugby I'm playing is going to pay me enough to sustain me and my livelihood so that I'm able to put in the hours needed for me to be the excellent player that I need to become, right? So I would say that is it. I really like what Jabu mentioned about some of the soft skills that you build. I remember that for me at some point, it was broken down to like the 5 personal growth, the 5 C's. So you have commitment, you have confidence building, you have concentration, you have control, you have communication. When you learn how to trust your teammates, when you learn how to show up even when you don't feel like it. I mean, how many of you usually wake up and do a morning jog, or you wake up and you have to just keep that going? If you're in the sports field and you're doing this full time and that's your job, then that's actually the 9 to 5 that we're clocking into. So I think it's about making that the normalcy, like making that what and how we see sports and athletes. Thank you.
When you spoke about those who wake up to do a morning jog, you clearly knew why I was laughing.
How are you doing?
Well, not quite. But you could keep your comments coming through, or your questions from the deliberations we have. One of the comments coming through, this is from Cynthia Nandua from Box Girls Kenya. We use boxing as a main tool to initiate conversations around issues affecting girls and young women aged 8 to 23 years, to challenge negative stereotypes regarding women's participation in sports, especially boxing. Tough one therein. We use boxing for leadership development, self-defense, fitness, and fun. I am following the conversation and I agree mentorship is key, but should be accompanied by awareness for narrative change, appreciate support, safeguarding, and inclusion. And this is my question to Shimaa and Charity. The limitations that female athletes go through in trying to scale, one, the heights and the opportunities that they probably have. Rugby players on the field have the challenges. Boxing, we've just seen from Cynthia here. Thank you very much, Cynthia, for that comment coming through. To Shimaa first, how is that being navigated in Egypt? And then possibly later to Charity on the global scale. How is the challenge of women's participation in both sport and employment and the opportunities that come through, or lack of, being navigated? Shimaa, you able to hear me? Or Charity, you could go first. You could have a go.
Yes, so I would say about being a woman in sports, you can think about the limitations that maybe come with just the expectations. So normally, for example, when we watch the Champions League, we're watching males play sports, and that's the most popular sport as per now, right? There are women who play football as well. It's just not as popular. So I think when you look at just the statistics and the expectations for women in sports and men in sports, is very different. And also, there are certain challenges that women do go through. For example, if they're going through a period in which they're pregnant, for example, and career stagnations that do the shaking.
Charity, I think we could have lost you there. We could possibly have lost you there.
No.
Have lost you there. Charity, we could have lost you. Well, I think as Charity tries to get back on, Shimaa, the limitations for women's involvement in sports and the opportunities, how is it in North Africa? How is it in Egypt? And how is it being dealt with?
Actually, I feel that the challenges for hello?
Yes, we can hear you. I at least can hear you. I think the others too should be able to hear you as well.
Are you hearing me?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, we are. Yes, we are. Shimaa, we can hear you. You could actually proceed and make your comments.
You hear me, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. For me, I think there are a few key challenges, especially for girls or women. One of the main issue is the limited access, because the challenge in sports is that the culture, what the culture factors, and also financial difficulties, lack of support because you are a woman working in a field dominated with men. So in many cases, even when girls are involved in a sport, there is no clear pathway that connects their participation to real career opportunities. Another issue is lack of awareness. Many young people simply don't know what opportunities exist beyond playing, So to address this, we need more structured program, better awareness, and stronger support system that make these opportunities more accessible and sustainable. For me, when I worked in a sports law, I faced many obstacles because it's in Egypt the field is new, sports law is something new, and also most of the people who entered in this field, they are all men, so it's new, and a woman worked as a sports lawyer. Mainly when a player or a coach or a club, they wanted to deal with a man, because it's a mindset that men know more than women, especially in sport, on football also. So what I did, I tried to read more about, and that's what I'd advise young people about it. If you are interested in a field, you have to read a lot about this field, because maybe you are just interested and this is not your work. You will not work in this field after. So you have to maybe you are just feel like, wow, this I want to work in this, but when you learn more about this, maybe you don't feel that I'm interested in this field. So I started to work on myself and read more about regulations, FIFA regulations, CAS, read about lost cases and what happened, and follow the media. So the challenge was the knowledge, and I earned the knowledge, and after that I worked on myself to make like awareness about legal tips, giving legal tips. So after that, I convinced them, the society. So so the challenge about the culture and also about working on yourself, because if you are weak, no one can convince about you. So so also when we have like football women league in Egypt and in other countries, Saudi Arabia and other African countries, they don't know, the women, female, they don't know that they have rights, and they have legal rights, they have contract. The main thing is if you don't have knowledge, you cannot do anything. So that's why I made my initiative about conscious female players. So I give them tips how they can handle their contracts, how. So if you are you're working as a football player, you're working as in marketing, in any field, you have to know first, and after that you can start and improve your skills.
Thank you very much. We'll start and improve your skills. We've had Shimaa is indeed bossing the legal space in Egypt with her legal things and the wonderful. If you really check her pages, I think on LinkedIn, you'll see some of the decisions that she's been successful at. Thank you very much for that space. Jabu, you have something that you'd want to say, and I think it is, and let me probably preempt this one. Sports and the knowledge, but then also the sports and the desire to acquire that knowledge that should put you in a position to get a job. What kind of jobs could be easily available for a sports person to do with the access to knowledge? Can a sports person suddenly become a chemist, or they need to have gone first to science school, then they do sports along the way and become that? Something along those lines. How then do we create that balance?
Yeah, sure, Leon. I think before I jump into that question, I'd just like to add to what Shimaa was saying. And that's just to comment to say that too often we treat barriers facing women and girls in sports as if they are only women's problems to solve. And they are not, right? Because they are everyone's problem. And that means that men also have a duty to be part of the solution, to act as allies. I believe as men, we need to be allies by challenging unfair attitudes, opening doors, supporting opportunities, and most importantly, standing alongside women and girls as they break these barriers. Because I believe when we do that, we do not just help women and girls sports and their participation in it grow, but we're also helping to make sports better for everyone in the world. So I think it was important for me just to mention that. To your question, I believe there are, as I mentioned, to go back to a comment I made earlier on in the webinar, is that one of the great characteristics about the sports industry as an economic sector, insofar as workforce is concerned, is that it's one of the very few industries in the world where you don't necessarily need to have a specific degree or qualification in order to get into the job. So, for example, you can't be a doctor without having gone to medicine school. You can't be a lawyer without having gone to law school. But when you look at the profile of all the different people who are involved in the industry,
apologies for that interruption, but I think, yes, you may. You kindly proceed.
Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. So I was just saying that, to your question, when we speak about how we can address the gap when it comes to the desire to be involved in the sports industry, but then the technical know-how is as important. And today, if you look at the internet and all the different platforms that are available, I know that the IOC also does this as well, is that there are many short courses, some and most of which are free, that people can actually purchase or they can enroll themselves in order to get those skills. But a problem that we're solving when it comes to that is that there's a paucity of these online courses that allow people to transition or gain an introductory knowledge of the sports industry in Africa. If you can look, just go on Google, quick activity, search sports course, whatever field in sport that you'd like to go into, and say Africa right at the end. And you'll see that there's such a lack of short courses, for example, or short form learning opportunities for young people, but also for people who are transitioning out of a professional context of sports into the business of sports. It's very difficult to find that knowledge of how one can navigate the African sports industry when trying to job search, when trying to find these opportunities. So this is a gap, I believe. It requires a joint effort, not only from one actor. I mean, we at Ithuba Lethu Sports Hub can't do this all alone, right? We definitely need the support and the collaboration of stakeholders across the sports industry. We know that the African Union Sports Council is already doing an incredible job in trying to empower these opportunities. You see in their work that they do with the young African leaders in sports, which I'm a part of. But I think there's so much more to do, Leon. There's so much more to do when it comes to empowering people and educating people about the opportunities that are available for them in the sports industry. And do not forget, as much as we hear the stats, Dr. Sanders touched on them earlier on in this call about youth employability and how many jobs this continent is currently generating against the number of young people that are coming into the workforce each and every year. As it said on his deck, it said it's a ticking time bomb. Definitely is, right? So I believe that this definitely would only be resolved through a jointed efforts, not only from stakeholders within the sports industry, but also corporate entities, banking entities who are able to provide the research, provide young people with the opportunities to be able to understand the impact that sports has, not only on themselves, but also the wider economy within Africa. So yeah, Leon, I believe there's a lot to do. There are many actors who show will within the sector to solve these issues. I think what is really needed is for us to all come together and resolve some sort of jointed efforts in which we can tackle this issue, because it's a very big one and it's one not only one person can resolve.
Great, very big issue. And you just definitely couldn't have said it any better than that. And thank you very much for the comments that are coming through, and I will read some of them quickly. Adedami, he says, great conversation so far. It is important to add that commercially viable pro sports organizations, probably the kind that you're talking about, even beyond Jabu, could provide opportunities. Leagues, clubs, events, competitions are perhaps the most effective and efficient ways for sports to provide jobs for youth. We don't have enough commercially viable pro sports organizations on the continent. That's a critical starting point. Right into what you were saying, Jabu, over there. And again, Cindy Olwatch from Cheza Dance Foundation in Kenya, she uses dance to influence the population, the young people in Kenya. We focus on dance to support, we focus on dance cultivating a generation of servant leaders by creating strategic pathways for them to thrive. Thank you very much. Tube, in my view, Africa needs to shift its focus. I am sorry for the long question, but when are we going to advocate for a dual career policy? There is no country in Africa, mirroring exceptions to be made for maybe South Africa, that has a dual career policy, but every continent does. A dual career policy allows for athletes to balance school and sport, making them successful in sport as well as they are in education, leading to employable skills. In addition, we need to move more towards sport for commercialization and entrepreneurship than the hobbies that we have been talking about. Alex from AgriSport International, we use sport as a tool to mobilize and support young people in agribusiness, and then we connect them to sport ecosystems for mentorship from athletes. We also encourage African athletes to really invest massively in agribusiness to create a sustainable job for their funds. Our approach contributes to reduce youth unemployment. Actually, we're using basketball, football, and combat sport. Key issues here: mentorship, agribusiness, entrepreneurship. But one question remains, and I would want to throw that one to Cynthia, who we had lost earlier. Cynthia, the question here is, where are we going wrong as Africa? The discussions highlight a number of interventions, but the narrative highlights ongoing challenges that we seem not to be making a dent. Are our ministers of sports failing us? Are we seeing each other's, are we seeing each other as competitors than partners within the space of sports for development? Very, very final question here. I think, Charity, if you are available, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Hello,
Where are
sir.
we going wrong?
You think I can share something?
Is that too big?
Good afternoon. Do you think I can share something? Somebody.
Yeah. Are you going to allow for like 2 minutes for people to talk?
Yes, we shall definitely get to that in a jiffy, but I would like to hear from Charity with regard to matters around who should be responsible for moving this particular direction. Should it be our ministers? Should it be the government? Should it be the other organizations that are out of governments? I would love to hear Cynthia, Charity rather.
Yes.
Charity Mwathi. My apologies there.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry
Charity.
about that. I also lost connection, so I hope it's okay if I just join the call without having my video. I think I have bandwidth issues at the moment. But I think it takes the whole trifecta to honestly work on this. We need the ministers, we need the private sector, we need everyone really involved. But I would love to say that obviously when you have the right institutional resourcing and the right investment when it comes to the Ministry of Sports for all these countries, it's much easier for the athletes to feel supported, to feel encouraged, and to feel like they can grow in this sector, as I said. So I would definitely, say that we need more when it comes to that, at least the governmental side, more support in that. And also make it easy, make it a pathway and not really an endpoint where you can have, the connection of sports to skills and credentials to actual jobs, right? When you're filling in your CV and you can say that you have worked in XYZ community doing, basketball, whatever it is, like actually have that develop and be seen in a way that is equal to anyone who has gone and done an internship, for example, in a 9 to 5 office job. So I think it takes everyone to actually make that grow, but obviously calling on, the governments to put in more investment and work in that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Charity. The ministers will be meeting in Glasgow for the Commonwealth Ministers meeting. I hope that will be an item on their table just as much. We had 2 hands up, and I would like to invite Dr. Ben Sanders again to, throw in something about the conversation we're having. Doctor.
Thank you. Just very quickly, thanks for all the great questions and debate. It's a really important one. About what is possible and what isn't. And a lot of conversations focused on athletes, but athletes are a tiny proportion of the sports sector, and elite athletes are an even smaller proportion of that sector. The biggest opportunity for sport to contribute meaningfully to employment is not through athletes. It's through administrators, managers, coaches. And when I say coaches, I don't mean elite coaches only. I mean community coaches working in schools, communities, getting kids active, solving health problems. The evidence shows investments in grassroots sport, sport for all, sport for development are more effective than investments in elite sport. We can have both, and they are both important, but Instead of investing money in an elite proportion of athletes, we should be directing investments more prominently to community coaches, teachers, educators, practitioners on the front lines, often doing great work, but with very little reward. So athletes great and elite athletes great, but really if we truly believe in sport making a dent in youth unemployment in Africa, and if we truly believe in sport contributing to a better society, it's at a scale, it's at grassroots sport, sport for all, sport for development, and governments, especially governments who are meant to finance the public good, should be putting most of their investments in sport towards mass participation, which again, the evidence shows is much more likely to contribute to health and well-being than investments in elite sport and infrastructure. So I'm not trying to be oppositional here, but I'm just saying that is what the evidence says. And if we believe in that, we should follow the evidence and policies should move in that direction too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And indeed, Adedami there adds on to that and says, you just made this point perfectly. Mass participation starting from the communities and the schools. The bigger question that remains is that does your policymaker see it this way? Does the member of parliament, does your government think that the direction should be this? That is where we need to just as much push the energies. Ithuba, you have your hand up and I'd love to take or hear your comment quickly.
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, first, for organizing this quite interesting conversations. My name is Ithuba. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Kentucky, but I'm from Botswana. I do my research on youth sports. I do my research on life skills, as well as mental health for youth athletes. So interesting. In my view, I'm going to take a different route a little bit. I think that Africa needs to first pause and say, okay, if there is someone in France who's really good at what they do, how do they acquire those skills? Whether you're a good football player or you're a medical doctor or you're a teacher, how did you acquire those skills? There are only two ways through which you can acquire these skills. One is by going to school, learning, and being a good medical doctor. Another way is through maybe apprenticeship, where you get experience of doing it. Both of those are good, but one is kind of complex to do. So Africa needs to say, okay, just like in Europe, there's a dual career policy. Some countries are against the law for a child to play sports without being in school. So Africa, if at African Union level can develop those guidelines or that policy, just like European Commission has that. In the United States, has it. In Asia, it has it. So if there are those guidelines, it ensures that athletes go to school and then they play sports at the same time. When they graduate, then they are not worried about adding to unemployment rate that's across the African continent. So I think we need to shift and look at things from that perspective. Secondly, we need to separate like policy. For example, elite commercial sports, very crucial for employment creation, for industry, for so many things. That policy needs to be different from recreation and sports for all. Because even though it's sports, but it's different sports. Like if you're a winner at the Olympic Games, which is what Africa wants, you need experts who can get you to win. But community sport, it's something different. And Africa needs to understand that because if you go to France, those things are not just jumbled together or any other place. It's clear who does what. And then also, we need to understand that for you to do something, you have to be an expert in it. Then you're going to be the best at it. So we can just assume that because you played sports, then you can do it. If you played sports, let's give you life skills so that you can transfer those skills and be impactful, So I wish that we had more platform to talk about this because I do this thing in Africa all over. I travel a lot, like in Botswana, where I'm from, South Africa, Zambia, and all those places. It's sad sometimes because you can see that here, this person is great, but they need like really good knowledge to be impactful, There's no policy sometimes. For example, there's no policy that says, okay, you need to train medical doctors who specialize in sports, for example. A team will travel with a nurse or a physiotherapist who doesn't deal with sports injuries. There's no country in Europe you can travel with a physiotherapist who just deals with regular patients. Because sports injuries are different. They're like military injuries. You need like people trained with deep experts. So I'm sorry for taking a lot of your time, but I think that we need to kind of reset and decide the direction we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ithuba. There, wonderful comments, quite a deviation from what the others were thinking, but nonetheless, it helps build the conversation on what opportunities can be made available for the athletes. Others think the composition for this is not just the athlete, the elite one. It should be through the administrators, the coaches, the officials, the governments. A divergence of views here, but just as much the kind that can be put together to ensure that we have opportunities for our people and our young people on the continent of Africa. Our time is fast spent. Ken, I'm going to ask that you probably type that question or that comment in the chat box over the next 30 seconds, but I'd really appreciate the fact that you've been able to be with us for this particular conversation. It can only get bigger. It is a conversation that can go on and on, but the major thing here is the time is now. Sekunjalo Kenako. It is the major issues: mentorship, mass participation, school, entrepreneurship, apprenticeship. They're in a package of skills that could help our young people get through, one, their sport, and also be able to have the opportunities to work. Ladies and gentlemen, on my part, it was such a pleasure having this conversation. We are going to compile the comments, the submissions therein, and the recommendations. These will be shared through the addresses and also the presentations that you had shared with us in your admission to this particular webinar. It has indeed been a very great pleasure having our panelists here today. And if you could possibly, show them that hand clap, I would be very, very grateful. Miss Charity Mwathi from the Commonwealth Secretariat, Mr. Jabu Mutuwa from Ithuba, Lethu Sports Hub, and Miss Shimaa Daly. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your insights with the Africa and for putting this webinar together. Ladies and gentlemen, and I can only say we need many more of these kind of conversations. From the Young African Leaders in Sport, Mr. Timothy Kajja, Dr. Deshas Chipande, the head of the African Union Sports Council, and Dr. Ben Sanders, the executive director of the International Platform on Sport and Development. We can only keep this work going, have a very wonderful, safe space, and create opportunity for our sports personalities. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizers of this webinar, I would like to say thank you very much for your participation, the comments, the recommendations, and the submissions. It was indeed a pleasure having all of you. I am Leon Senyange, and I'd like to wish you the best and the rest, for the best and the rest of your week. Ladies and gentlemen, till we meet again. Thank you very much.